I was never meant to survive. At least that's what my family had decided. The night of the fire, when smoke filled the hallways and heat cracked the walls, I remember crawling toward the door only to see my brothers, my parents, all of them, leading her to safety. The girl they had adopted, the girl they had chosen over me, their true child, their precious daughter. They left me behind. I heard the laughter, the whispers of betrayal, and then nothing but flames. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't ash. I wasn't broken. I was back reborn months before it all went wrong. And this time, I wouldn't beg for their love. This time, I'd burn them myself. The smoke tasted like betrayal. I crawled, lungs burning, while the world around me split into two. The faces that shoved Madeline out first, crying for her safety, and the shadow of a life that was left behind. They walked away from me, my blood, my screams, because they'd chosen a prettier story. Months later I woke in a body not yet burnt, 2 months before the night. I had time. I had memory. I had no mercy left. Returning felt like stepping into a portrait where I once stood at the margins. The house smelled of polished wood and jasmine, of voices practiced to sound tender. There she was, Madeline's sunlight wrapped around her like a halo. My brother's smiles at her were warm enough to make you forget you were excluded. I clenched my hands and pretended to be the ghost they had always assumed I was. Better to watch them lower their guard. Revenge, I learned, is arithmetic. I watched my brothers like a man studies tides. Victor loved public esteem. Thomas worshipped investment deals. Marcus had a weakness for old debts. Andre kept secrets in his drawers. Leo chased approval with a smile. Each trait was a hinge. I started a small notebook, a ledger of leverage. Names, dates, small embarrassments that would rot reputations slowly. The first shift was almost tiny. Thomas bragged about a loan he'd secured for a project that would prove him brilliant. I called the bank polite, soft voice asked for clarification. Paperwork delayed. Thomas's confidence cracked. He drank more. He snapped publicly. The other brothers began to notice a fissure where he'd always been polished. That little delay bought me time and, more importantly, changed how they saw him. Madeline's perfection was an act curated by others. She learned to cry at the right time, to smile when cameras flashed. I started volunteering at the charity she loved to parade in. I did the work she avoided and learned the names of donors, the ledger holes. When a donor complained of a double charge, the committee turned its awkward glance toward the podium. Image cracked, their worship of her dimmed by the width of a ledger line. Victor carried a youthful indiscretion like a fossil long ancient but fragile if chipped. I found one who remembered his reckless years, and with gentle money and firm language, coaxed into telling an embellished anecdote to a local column. It was framed as nostalgia but tasted like salt on Victor's reputation. People began to wonder, if the elder could be careless once, could he be careless now? Questions like that travel further than accusations. Not all victories come from clever calls. Some require an artisan's touch. I assembled small truths bills that didn't match events, receipts that proved Madeline's lavish charity dinners were personal indulgences. I fed this to the committee anonymously, to the treasurer who hated being ignored. The result was a quiet investigation. Madeline answered with charm. The board answered with caution. She learned how sharp a table of numbers could be. Under pressure, families fracture inward. Victor lashed out at Thomas. Tomas accused Marcus of incompetence. Accusations that once washed over us now sank like stones. They sought scapegoats and found one another. I watched them tear at each other while I kept my hands clean. The very shields that had once protected Madeline were now deflecting barbs at one another. My ledger swelled with the cost of their pride. I called a family dinner under a pretense. Reconcile, air grievances, heal. They came because ceremony comforts the guilty. I sat at the head of the table, an unexpected place, and told them plainly what they already suspected in dreams, but ignored in daylight. They had left me to burn. Their silence was a confession. Faces went pale. Defenses fell awkwardly. Madeline's composure broke for a breath. That breath was when everything shifted from private rot to public fracture. The committee published a correction, and donors pulled support. Tomas declared an emergency meeting and found his investors wary. Victor missed meetings, then board seats. Madeline's social calendar changed from bright invitations to discreet glances. The family that once curated applause found themselves soothed by excuses and mended statements. Public pity is fickle. Reputational damage is a slow-working poison. I did not gloat. I watched the slow work of consequence take root. In the end, there was no dramatic trial, no shouting courtroom scene. The collapse was quiet. Lost seats, reduced accounts, fractured marriages. They called me angry, ungrateful, because the narrative had to protect their image even as it died. I left with a small bag and my ledger. I opened a school no grandeur, where people who'd been invisible could learn to make their own accounts balance. I built a life outside their portrait. Madeline called once, voice brittle with fear and false apology. I hung up. The fire that once nearly killed me had burned, yes, but it had also been my forge. Years later, I passed by their estate once, older, quieter, unneeded by them, and freed from needing them. A neighbor told me Madeline's name is now a cautionary anecdote among certain circles. My brothers find new paths, humbled in ways I never sought, but that felt like justice. I judge nothing more than the choices I made. To plan, to wait, to unmake illusions. Revenge filled a hole for a time, but the thing that steadied me was learning how to be a man who didn't require their approval, then or ever again.